Communism is a political and economic ideology that envisions a classless society where the means of production, such as land, factories, and businesses, are collectively owned rather than privately controlled. Rooted in the writings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, especially the Communist Manifesto, 1848, communism argues that capitalism inherently breeds inequality by concentrating wealth and power in the hands of the bourgeoisie, owners, while the proletariat, working class, is left to sell its labor for survival. Marx believed that this exploitation would inevitably lead to a revolution, wherein the working class would seize control of the economy, abolish private property, and establish a temporary dictatorship of the proletariat to guide the transition toward a stateless, classless society. In theory, communism promises equality, shared prosperity, and the end of oppression. Yet in practice, nations that attempted to implement communism, such as the Soviet Union, Maoist China, Cuba, and North Korea, often devolved into authoritarian regimes marked by centralized control, suppression of dissent, stagnation in innovation, and diminished personal freedoms. These outcomes have led many to distinguish such systems as Marxist-Leninist rather than pure communism. While some still champion communism for its anti-capitalist ideals and emphasis on social justice, critics argue that its failures reflect fundamental flaws in human nature and economic motivation, making it more of a utopian vision than a viable system. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production, where goods and services are created for profit in markets governed by supply and demand. It emphasizes individual freedom, entrepreneurship, and the accumulation of capital, allowing businesses and individuals, not the state, to make most economic decisions. Profit drives innovation, competition, and efficiency, while consumers benefit from choice and variety. Capitalism appears in various forms, from laissez-faire systems to regulated mixed economies, but all rely on the idea that free markets are the most efficient way to allocate resources. Supporters highlight capitalism's role in generating wealth, advancing technology, and expanding personal freedoms. Critics, however, argue that it fosters inequality, labor exploitation, and environmental degradation, especially when left unregulated. To address these issues, many capitalist societies incorporate laws, public services, and redistribution to balance growth with fairness. Ultimately, capitalism is a flexible and evolving system, whose success depends on managing the tension between private gain and the public good.
Socialism is a political and economic ideology that advocates for collective or state ownership of the means of production, aiming to reduce economic inequality and promote social welfare. Unlike capitalism, where private individuals own and profit from key industries, socialism holds that sectors like healthcare, education, and transportation should be publicly owned to ensure universal access and fairness. The core idea is that sharing resources more equally leads to a more just society. Forms of socialism vary. Democratic socialism, seen in countries like Sweden, blends free markets with strong public services and regulations, while more authoritarian models involve heavy state control and limited market freedom. Supporters argue socialism ensures basic needs are met, reduces poverty, and focuses on well-being over profit. Critics warn it can lead to inefficiency, reduced innovation, and bureaucracy. Many modern countries adopt socialist principles within mixed economies, seeking a balance between market freedom and public good.
Liberalism is a political and philosophical ideology rooted in individual freedom, equality before the law, limited government, and civil liberties. Emerging during the Enlightenment, it challenged monarchy and religious authority, promoting democracy, free expression, and constitutional rule. Thinkers like John Locke and John Stuart Mill shaped its core belief that individuals are rational and entitled to rights that governments must protect, not arbitrarily control.
liberalism has evolved over time. Classical liberalism favored free markets and minimal state interference, while modern liberalism supports a more active government role in ensuring equal opportunity, including universal health care, public education, and civil rights. Today, liberalism underpins many democratic systems, emphasizing the rule of law, free elections, and independent institutions. Critics argue it can either promote excessive individualism or fail to address deep inequalities, but it remains a key force in shaping modern politics, human rights, and global governance.
Conservatism is a political and philosophical ideology focused on preserving tradition, social stability, and established institutions with a cautious approach to change. Rather than endorsing a specific system, conservatism values continuity over radical reform, believing that long-standing customs, religious, legal, or familial, offer stability and moral guidance. Rooted in thinkers like Edmund Burke, it emerged in response to upheavals like the French Revolution, warning against utopian ideologies and emphasizing gradual, respectful adaptation. Modern conservatism varies by region. In the U.S., it often blends free market economics with social traditionalism, while in Europe, it may stress national identity and communitarian values. Conservatives typically advocate for limited government, law and order, national sovereignty, and personal responsibility. Critics argue it can resist social progress and uphold inequality, but supporters view it as a stabilizing force that values historical wisdom, prudence, and the preservation of societal foundations.
Fascism is a far-right authoritarian ideology that promotes dictatorship, nationalism, and suppression of dissent, placing the state above individual rights. Originating in early 20th century Europe, with leaders like Mussolini and Hitler, it rejected democracy and embraced militarism, racial purity myths, and total loyalty to the nation. While private property remained, fascist economies were controlled by the state, with unions banned and dissent crushed. Culturally, it enforced conformity, traditional roles, and used propaganda and violence to maintain control. Though discredited after World War II, neo-fascist movements have re-emerged in response to modern fears. At its core, fascism opposes freedom, equality, and democracy, favoring absolute power and control.
Anarchism is a political philosophy that rejects hierarchical authority and coercive government, advocating for societies based on voluntary cooperation, mutual aid, and self-governance. Far from promoting chaos, anarchism envisions a highly organized, non-hierarchical society where people manage their affairs without rulers or centralized institutions. Emerging in the 19th century, anarchism includes diverse branches like anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, individualism, and mutualism, but all oppose the state as inherently oppressive. Anarchists favored direct action over electoral politics and have played key roles in labor movements, anti-colonial struggles, and anti-authoritarian activism. Critics see it as unrealistic, but anarchists argue for the viability of decentralized cooperative models found in grassroots and indigenous systems.
Nationalism is a political ideology based on the belief that people who share a common identity through language, culture, ethnicity, or history should be united under a sovereign state that prioritizes their interests. It emphasizes loyalty to the nation as the natural political unit. Emerging in the 18th and 19th centuries, nationalism began as a liberatory force promoting self-determination and unification, but later evolved into both civic, based on shared values, and ethnic, based on ancestry, forms. While nationalism has inspired independence movements and anti-colonial struggles, it has also fueled xenophobia, militarism, and genocide, especially when tied to authoritarianism.
Environmentalism is a social and political movement focused on protecting the planet from pollution, climate change, and unsustainable practices to ensure the health of ecosystems and all life. Rising in the 20th century, especially after events like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and the first Earth Day, it advocates for conservation, sustainability, and ecological balance. Environmentalists push for policy reform, renewable energy, and behavioral change, while some emphasize environmental justice, linking ecological harm to social inequality. Others call for systemic shifts away from growth-driven capitalism. Critics argue environmentalism may hinder economic growth or impose restrictions, but scientific consensus warns that inaction risks irreversible planetary damage. Today, environmentalism is a global priority, shaping policy and inspiring activism to protect the planet's future.